Miasma Chronicles is a great tactical RPG with a compelling story and characters, some unique stealth mechanics, challenging turn-based battles, and deep but time-friendly exploration all wrapped up in a neat little package. Miasma Chronicles was developed by the Bearded Ladies, the same team behind another great post-apocalyptic TRPG, Mutant Year Zero, and will have you following the story of Elvis and his big brother robot, Diggs, as they try to unravel the mystery of a strange glove left to Elvis by his mama that has the power to control the miasma. The miasma is a mysterious and seemingly malevolent force that has destroyed America, leaving nothing but scattered settlements surrounded by endless wastelands. Ruling over the remnants of the once great nation is the family known only as the First Family, who control the lives of the survivors by way of fear and their army of high-tech military robots known as collectors. Battles in Miasma Chronicles will be familiar to anyone who has played games like XCOM with cover systems affecting chances to hit and a general move and fire type of gameplay, though with some significant twists. A fairly robust yet simple stealth mechanic will allow you to thin enemy ranks before engaging in all-out battle, and the miasma powers granted through Elvis's glove can give you a huge edge. There is also great exploration gameplay as well that will reward you with new weapons, loot, and outfits along with side quests and possible flanking routes. Then, to wrap it all up, the game is surprisingly great to look at despite the dark and gloomy apocalyptic atmosphere. Delving deeper now into the story, it begins as Elvis and Diggs are using Elvis's glove to try and break through the miasma wall to find their mother. This attempt fails, and as the two return home to Sedentary, they soon find out that their town is threatened by giant anthropomorphic frogs, presumably created by the miasma. The story then begins to unfold from there as you try to find a way to save your town. Miasma Chronicles does a great job of telling its story, not only through the various characters you will meet, but through the world itself. In fact, this is one of those games that manages to make the world itself a character. The environments you explore and the overall atmosphere of the game will tell the story of the collapse of society and give you glimpses into the final moments of the originals, the term the game uses for people who lived before the collapse. The bits of lore that you will often find will further build the world and its background and lead you to understand what exactly happened to the world, who was responsible, and even more about each character's background. The characters themselves are well written, each with their own faults and strengths that will help define them. Each of your recruitable characters are dynamic as well, developing and changing as the story progresses, as each character is forced to face their own mistakes. The NPCs aren't left out either, as they are all well written, and while not necessarily dynamic, they all have personality and come across as believable characters. This then brings us to the villains, who are slowly revealed to us as the story progresses. At first, the First Family is just some faceless, omnipotent organization that destroys those who don't produce for them, striking fear into all who know them. Eventually, though, we begin to piece together through the story and bits of lore who the First Family is and how they came to control America. This enemy remains interesting and threatening throughout the story and creates great motivation to take them down. But even the lesser baddies in the story and side quests are interesting enough to want you to find them and take them down too. The developers have done a great job creating a believable and interesting world populated with great characters who are further improved through what I thought was some great voice acting. To avoid spoiling anything though, that is as far as I'm going to go with the story, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what I thought was an excellent story and what you can expect. Moving on now to the gameplay, combat will see us using a familiar XCOM-like system with action points to move, use items, or fire our weapons, along with the use of various forms of cover to reduce the chance to be hit. When choosing the difficulty, we're actually given the choice of light or full tactical. With light tactical, things like how far away an enemy is won't affect hit chance, flanking attacks will always hit, and covers give specific amounts of protection, such as reducing the chance to be hit by an even 50 or 80%. Full tactical will give you a more XCOM-like experience with more factors affecting your hit chance and make the game more challenging overall. Personally, I like the light tactical better as it takes most of the RNG out of the game, allowing me to focus more on the tactics. Though this also brings me to my first gripe about the game, and that is that the enemy's 50% chance doesn't feel like 50% when they hit me 80% of the time. This leads me to think of low cover as relatively useless, as it never seems to work as well for me as it does for the enemy. Though I will say that sometimes being in low cover seemed to encourage enemies to move for better position rather than fire from where they were. Moving on though, what makes Miasma Chronicles unique from other XCOM-like games is the stealth mechanics and miasma powers. Most encounters aren't meant for you to charge headlong into. In fact, the game will be very difficult and frustrating if you do this, particularly on the higher difficulties. Instead, you should stealth around the perimeter, taking out as many enemies as you can with your silenced weapons while not being spotted. The game gives one of these weapons early on and eventually provides you with a second, which will help with tougher enemies. To help you with stealthily taking the enemies down, you'll need one of your most valuable consumables, glass bottles. Throwing these will allow you to attract enemies away from each other and take them out quietly, or avoid combat altogether by sneaking through the gap made in all the enemies' sightlines. In fact, I've been able to get some great loot by simply making all the enemies look away long enough that I was able to steal the loot right from underneath their noses. There is a great feeling that comes with successfully sneaking through enemy camps, or taking out all their sentries and then ambushing the last few enemies with a grenade or two. But this also brings me to another of my few gripes about the game, which is that some enemies, even lower tier ones later in the game, will require you to get a crit or even 2 crits while trying to take them out quietly, or they won't go down. This then encourages save scumming to get the crit because all enemies will be alerted once the enemy you attack takes its turn. This will then throw you into a combat that you may not be able to win outright, or that will use too many of your resources. Seeing as you are encouraged to take out enemies quietly as much as possible, this need for crits seems somewhat counter to that. Though it does add tension to the game, I suppose. Once you do find yourself in a pitched battle, you can use miasma powers to toss enemies into explosive barrels, stun multiple enemies at once, or even create your own explosive barrels. These powers have to be used sparingly though, as they require energy which can only be replenished through consumables or certain abilities later on. That said, these abilities can really turn the tide of battle when used right. Aside from those powers though, we have a whole slew of grenades, abilities, and weapons that can be used to great effect as well. One of my favorites is shotguns. These gain more crit chance the more enemies that are in their attack arc, meaning these are great for clearing out multiple small enemies. We also get action points back for each enemy we kill with a crit, meaning under the right circumstances, shotguns can lead to huge streaks taking out whole groups of enemies quickly. Grenades are another great option, as these can be used to do damage over time with the acid and napalm varieties, or they can be used to both damage enemies and set off nearby explosive barrels, thus stacking the two damages together. The variety of interesting and creative ways to deal with enemies in Miasma Chronicles really sets it apart and keeps it from the puzzle feeling that similar games can sometimes fall into. Moving from gameplay to the progression systems now, as I mentioned earlier, the game doesn't necessarily expect you to fight every battle, and as such, most of your experience points will actually come from completing quests, though you do still get some experience points for defeating enemies. This experience will then lead to new levels, which will provide us with a health boost and ability points to unlock new abilities. Each character has 4 separate upgrade paths with prerequisite abilities on each, and each of these branches will have a theme like miasma powers, crit chance, or control. The great part about these ability trees, though, is that while you won't be able to have all the abilities unlocked even at max level, you can freely refund ability points and reassign them as much as you like. This means that you can essentially play with different builds, or even adjust builds for the specific quest at hand. So the game is really open to experimentation, and I really enjoyed that. Personally, I like crit builds because this allows me to more reliably take out tougher enemies silently. Aside from the direct character upgrades though, there are also weapon mods and power cores that can be found in the world or purchased from shops. These mods will do things such as increase crit chance, crit damage, increase base damage, grant improved range to your weapons, or provide energy regeneration buffs, and the power cores will grant you things like armor, throw range, or movement range to your characters. You will also find new weapons out in the wild as well, or you can purchase them at shops. Though like another reviewer I watched mentioned, the shops are a trap. All the weapons that you could buy can eventually be found in the world, and with plastic, this world's money, being relatively hard to come by, the prices just aren't worth it. You're much better off using money on consumables, especially healing items and glass bottles. Onwards now to the exploration in the game. The exploration here feels useful and concise. But what do I mean by that? Well, exploring a new area won't take you a long time. Most of the areas aren't too big, so exploring them doesn't feel like a chore, yet there are still lots of places to look and loot to find. The amount of verticality in a lot of these areas gives us more nooks and crannies to look into, and exploring these is never a waste. We will find useful items, weapons, and bits of lore by spending just a few minutes exploring each new area. In addition to this, the exploration bleeds right over into combat too, as properly surveying a battlefield first will often lead to new flanking routes or higher ground to attack from that we might have otherwise missed. Miasma Chronicles provides us with an interesting and great-looking world that we will often find ourselves exploring, even if we didn't intend to. Speaking of a great-looking world, that brings us to the graphics and performance. Overall, the game looks great, and the world is highly detailed even when viewing it from a third-person perspective. The various lighting and particle effects do a great job of bringing the world to life, and the characters are all highly detailed. When moving between floors and buildings, the game does a great job of smoothly removing the higher floors from view while exploring. The cutscenes, too, are really well done, and characters seem to move naturally. On the performance side, even for my somewhat dated rig running a GTX 1080 and Ryzen 7 processor, I was able to run everything on Ultra with no hiccups or slowdowns. The only issue I ran into was a crash that would sometimes happen when using a grenade to damage an enemy and set off an explosive barrel at the same time. But when it comes to the list of great tactical RPGs I've played, Miasma Chronicles ranks right up there near the top. I really enjoyed this one, and I hope that you will too. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment if you have any questions or stories to share about Miasma Chronicles. For more RPG goodness, watch this video next, and as always, thank you so much for watching, have a great day, and keep on gaming.